This is Chris with South Bay Tech Gurus, and I am about to make a phone call because of a technical issue that has recently come up, and it involves installing a hard drive, or SSD in this case, sensor for an iMac that was built after 2012. And I guess there's an issue with the sensor not necessarily being needed on later model iMac. So we're going to jump on the phone. My customer here wants me to help install a new SSD into his 2012 iMac, and there seems to be question about whether or not a thermal sensor needs to be physically installed, and he's been doing his own research as well as I, and as far as I knew, 2012 and later didn't need an additional sensor. Turns out, well, let's get him on the phone. All right, let's see here. Okie dokie. Alright, let's see. Hey, this is Chris. Brian? Ben? Hey, alright. So I got your emails, and it looks like that article you sent me about this sensor implies that the 2012 and the 2013 still need the sensor, but the 14 and later don't. That's what I gathered from that second link you sent me from iFixit. Let's see here. Where's my cursor? Let's see here. Yeah, so...
I don't have your cursor.
No. Let's see here. Okay, so that you sent me that second email with the iFixit logo about people asking about it. And what it implies is that the 2012 and 13 still require the OWC sensor, as Apple did not update the firmware with the newer version of the Smart Apple peddled at the ANSI EIA Group's Smart Consortium. It took some effort on Apple's part to get the needed change. So the Smart Thermal Sensor IRQ method could be pulled directly. So what is it? Okay, so then they go into what an IRQ is. So what it basically comes down to is that the 2012 and the 2013 still need that adapter. And frankly, honestly, I don't think I've ever needed or used that adapter on anything built after 2012. But it's never been a problem. So I don't know how many machines that I've got built out there that don't have that sensor. But no one's come back at me, and any machine that's I've worked on repeatedly had nothing to do with, hey, my drive isn't working properly. So
and on those conversions, do you remember having to do the hack, the firmware hack?
No, they just worked.
Okay.
I mean, as far as what my theory is that because the new format offered from Apple, the file format offered from Apple, the that goes beyond the after the journaling system that they've used up until several years ago, fixes that issue, even though they're implying that the 2012 and the 2013 don't have the firmware necessary to be flawless.
Right. I'm using that journaling system, of course.
Right. So when you put the later system on there, the later file system, that's more catered specifically to the SSD hardware. Just so that, I mean, for a while, both Apple and, or was it Apple, but I think PC users were their SSDs were dying prematurely because the NTFS format wasn't behaving properly, and it was destroying or prematurely killing SSDs because their NTFS file system was more regulated to a mechanical drive also.
Right.
So I can't imagine you'd be hurting anything. You might end up spending the extra $35 for that adapter, since it doesn't look like it's added really much labor. It's just an extra little part.
Right. I don't mind spending the money if we're confident that it's likely necessary. I don't want you to have to go back in again.
Right.
If it's,
Yeah.
So if you wanted to do it, the cheapest thing for me would be to use the older, and again that SSD drive is 2012, so it wouldn't have anything later than its firmware wouldn't be anything modern.
Right.
The extreme model that's listed as 480 gigabyte was listed as 480 because what they did was to allocate more bits for replacement segments.
Right.
replace some blocks. So it's a high reliability drive at the time, and it's got a few years on it, but it was used as a primary drive, but it was never used heavily. A lot of it was idle. Most of it was idle time.
Right.
So I'm assuming I'll check it out, and then you can check it out, and assuming we're comfortable with that.
I think at this point, I mean, I've never had a problem with a 2012 or 2013 that I've done this repair on, and it's probably 80 or 90% of the repairs I'm due on an iMac. I would imagine let's just go ahead and spend the extra $35 on the sensor since it's implied that it's needed, even though I've made apparently the mistake of assuming it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe.
Okay, so it shouldn't hurt anything. So
yeah.
I'll go ahead and get that.
You may as well do that.
Here's another question,
sure.
An ancillary question, but have you had any experience with converting these older iMacs that may be toward the end of their useful upgrade life as far as Apple is concerned to Linux?
Oh, I got a friend. Yeah, actually, my friend literally just a week ago, he tried to put Linux on an iMac, and there were several driver issues.
Okay, I know there's ways to do it, and there's a lot of Linux support for these old iMacs, and some people are saying, and I think you could probably make a side business by figuring out what needs to be done, but I think other people have already done it.
Right. No, I got a friend who's in love with Linux, and he wanted to. I actually gave him one of my customers. Her husband had recently passed, so she also upgraded her computer. So that meant she had 2 old iMacs laying around. So she gave me both of those machines. They both needed hard drives, so I gave one of those drives to a friend, and he loves Linux, and he tried to do this literally just days ago, and he had issues with the driver, like audio. Just certain basic things. It just didn't work reliably. And the funny, weird thing is we both thought that there might be something that we did wrong with the hardware. Since I had witnessed these machines and spent years working on them with this customer, it turns out the audio driver was misbehaving in that the mini jack for a headphone jack was working, but the actual speakers were not shooting sound out. So that was one of those oddball, how would anyone think that the audio would shoot out audio through the audio jack in the back, but not the speakers? And that's when we just re-imaged it with Apple on it, and it works flawlessly with no hardware issues, except that we've replaced the drive.
Yeah, I think that's probably a simple issue. Leo Laporte has done a bunch of stuff and answered questions periodically, more than once.
Right.
He's a real Linux nut.
Right.
And there's different flavors. I know enough to be dangerous. There's a number of Linux flavors, and they're it's an open source and supported, and you can download different versions of Linux with various degrees of support, and the more supported ones apparently have these kinks worked out for almost all iMacs, or many of them.
Right.
So if you can come up with a viable combination of stuff, and I suspect it's already been done if you guys can find it, that would be a secondary market. You could convert these, the older stuff and put on a stable everything.
Right.
And for those few people, there's a number of people who would do that as long as it could be done at a reasonable cost with a reliable machine. You've got years worth of basically what the internet considers to be current software.
Right.
Because it would be with browsers and various things that are supported.
Yeah, I'd have to do some research because I don't know about the reliability, since my friend he's always itching to get Linux on these machines, because obviously it's a way to reduce your chances of infection. If you get a virus in Linux, it's very few viruses in Linux available. So
do you know which flavor he put on?
I think he left. Yeah, I forgot, but I'll ask him.
Okay.
I don't know how different the driver base is between each revision or each version of Linux.
Yeah, there's from Leo Laporte's explanation, there's so many different flavors. I don't mean large quantity, but ones that are supported currently and so on. And he has had discussions of this on his show, and so I'm sure they're on its wiki or whatever. If somebody wanted to take the time to get that,
right,
get all the right information once and make it work. Because all you'd need, if there's a driver variation for a certain model, that driver variation has probably already been done out there. It's somebody's got it. It might just be something that you have to add to the to the otherwise already customized Linux install.
Right. Yeah, I guess I could do some research and see if that's possible or practical, because one of the things is, given what I'm up to, I don't want to have what turns out to be a warranty nightmare because customers can't get the simple stuff to work.
Right. You'd want a constellation of working
You there?
open office or, a little combination of stuff.
Right.
But supposedly that exists. If you had a customer who was dedicated enough to the Linux and loved that stuff,
Right.
Real Reports already knows that there are solutions out there, according to him, and he's not just a beginner. He's been a Linux
Right.
fan
Oh, yeah.
for decades, and he has them running on his own machines in most cases.
Right.
Not necessarily the old ones you're talking about, but there are support groups that do have all that already worked out. It's not. It shouldn't be new information. Kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I just get like my friend who wanted to give his friend this computer with Linux on it. There were certain simple things that weren't happening correctly, and I'm thinking, no, that he kept asking me if there were hardware issues with it, and I said, not now, since the drive has been replaced. So, I'll just have to do some more research and confirm a nice, solid iMac-friendly distribution of Linux.
Yeah, or get your friend upgraded enough to be able to do his own research down the Linux rabbit hole,
Right.
Linux Mac rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because if I'm assuming Real Report is more or less correct,
Right.
he doesn't take Linux casually.
No.
And if you listen to some of the podcasts for his programs where he's discussed this, he even gets surprisingly deep in the weeds just on the radio podcast.
Yeah, he's a definite enthusiast, and obviously he's got his skills, and obviously I can't be giving my customers a technical situation where they're constantly, it's almost like, can you imagine giving a carbureted engine to a millennial and not telling them what a carburetor is?
Right, but once you got a particular flavor set up and you and a couple other people did some thorough testing, and you're happy with that, that's what you could offer and say, hey, you don't have to charge a lot for it, but you have to charge something to justify all the hardware and the
Right.
installation.
Yeah, those are all fun ideas. So I've got what I realized was I have two spare iMacs just laying around. I think I might screw around with it. I got a 21-inch and a 27-inch, just both 2012s waiting for hard drives. So
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we get mine done, we'd have another one that would be available or could be made available if you find a newer model that I might be interested in for any length of time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's a viable side gig that I think is, from what I know, and I've been paying attention to this a little bit just via Real Report over the last 3 years, and it looks like it's already viable. This isn't new information. You'd have to have somebody, you or somebody else, or both of you, that got fully up to speed on it.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a valid option.
It's not done overnight, but it's already done out there. And like I say, Real Report they're changing their podcast format, but traditionally everything that's up there up to this point has already, for the radio programs, has already been wikied, if you can figure out how it works on his site.
All right. Well, I'll use him for a resource, and also what I like to do is I'll go to YouTube and see. I'll actually watch someone go through the motions of installing Linux. We'll figure out which version it is, and hopefully they're savvy enough or articulate enough to explain the nuances that you need to know.
Yeah, if you find that once, the problem is that's one guy.
Right. But
and
also, if it's one distribution on one exact piece of hardware, obviously with Apple, it's an easier thing to follow than if it were a PC, where you have a myriad of combination of hardware collections.
Yeah. If you or somebody reviews the last month, probably, or maybe 5 weeks, of the radio podcasts,
Yeah.
or the wiki for that, I think you will find at least more than one surprisingly substantial discussion by Real Report in answering this over the air.
Yeah. Okay.
which gave people background. Basically, what I would, I suppose, throw the question that maybe there should be a caution involved in looking at a YouTube video on this of one guy sampling how things were a couple years ago, because apparently it has to do with some Linux distributions that used to be, the best for the Mac, and now maybe 2 years later, now the landscape has changed a bit, and Leo seems to have paid enough attention to have knowledge of this.
Right.
So he's in the process of answering people's questions over the radio. He ends up answering and saying, so, okay, specifically, basically, I would recommend this and or this distribution, and why.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
And there's new current information within the last month or month and a half up there that I've heard him broadcast that was live. So,
yeah. Okay. So one of the most. Go ahead.
If you can find that, I think that would be useful to add into whatever you find on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know how searchable. I don't know what kind of metadata he puts into each of his podcasts, but I can do a search for Linux and iMac or whatever. And
they have their own guy doing their own transcription.
Right.
You have to get on his website and figure where this stuff is and figure out how it works and how to search it. But it's already done. This guy's been doing transcriptions of the radio show with specifics and indexable on their site for 10 years or something.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I haven't really thought of looking up that particular issue, just because Linux, I never really considered it polished enough to give my novice customers. That's all.
Right. I don't know Linux, but the Mac-centric flavor of that obviously makes it sound very worthwhile for certain things.
Right.
Part of which are right up your alley.
Right.
And Leo Laporte is a resource that's I respect and suspect that it is current and good information.
Right.
And he's not making money on it. This is from personal interest, and he's a very intelligent guy.
Yes.
So he has limitations, but he's definitely has experimented with various kinds of software. He's not real strong on technical stuff. He's not a good Ohm's law guy, or he runs into limitations pretty quick when he starts pretending that he's good with stuff. But the software overview he pays a lot of attention to, and he's done a lot of programming himself, including Linux stuff. So
cool. Yeah, I can do some research, and it sounds like you're almost interested in putting Linux on it yourself, on your own machine. So
well, maybe in the future. Right now I'm interested in pretty much what I told you, but getting a machine that's Mac reliable enough for another year at least.
Right.
And then, as soon as I could afford good hardware, I'd go with that. But that requires changing basically everything. In other words, the new stuff is Thunderbolt, 3 or 4?
Yes.
And it's expandable with external monitors, and you need faster. It could use faster external storage.
Right.
So it would be a whole, update.
Right. Well, now the new thing is USB's been replaced with USB-C, which does all that external support. It's got all sorts of backward compatibility. So you can use USB for monitors, any other adapters, USB-C directly. Yeah. So
that's exactly right. And OWC has some nice, not cheap, but docks.
Oh yeah. They've always been a slightly premium offering of expanded peripheral hardware.
Yeah. So it would be worth, doing a major system upgrade, which is a big deal.
Right.
So this is just a carryover thing, and I'd like to see if you do some stuff with Linux. I wouldn't hesitate at some point to have something on my own, or to buy something, one of the obsolete machines that you come across, just to have it to be able to have conversation with you and play with it. But it's not high priority on my list.
No, but I think it's probably worth getting certain people away from Windows or Macintosh, just because viruses are so prolific on both now. So
and for the obsolete Mac market, where you have really potentially very nice hardware that's extremely usable for basic internet coverage and all that, and you've got systems that are pretty much supported often to a reasonable future for these machines, and that creates your secondary market of decent hardware at what may look like very reasonable prices to to folks who can use that.
Right. Yeah, because right now we've already talked about on our last phone call that hardware from Apple is generally obsolete simply because if they choose after 5 years not to run the latest OS, the first thing you notice is that your browser's out of date.
Right.
So, going to Linux would mean you would, generally speaking, have a very up-to-date browser indefinitely.
Right. And if not forever on these Macs, if
Right.
they get another 5 years out of them,
Right.
and if they're machines that you can get cheaply or are donated, obviously there's the profit potential once you work it out is
Yeah.
an income stream.
Yeah, I mean, I got these. People literally give me machines because they're upgrading, as by my recommendation, replacing them before they actually fail, so that the heartache of me having to figure out what they had versus what they do have, so that I can get them on their current situation, their current hardware, working as similarly as possible as the old hardware. It's just easier with the old hardware still working.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
There's also the market that, there's kids around that are going to go need these for school, and there's a secondary market there.
Yes.
For the folks who don't have a lot of money and just want some system that's more or less, not sort of bulletproof, but already tested.
Yes, it's another venue to make things working because a lot of people that go to school again. The Chromebooks are just so anemic and they're so locked down. They need an alternative that's not necessarily a Windows machine.
That's right. Any of the old iMacs that are more than 2 core are likely to work for a while if they could be Linux
Yes.
size.
Yes.
And maybe I've got an old 2 core iMac, 24-inch, which probably could be used for something if I really wanted to do something with it under a Linux operating system. But
Yes. Cool. So back to your machine. I think that $35 adapter is probably worth the investment. I do trust iFixit as a valid source. We could do a little bit of searching around some more if you really need to, but I'm thinking that looks like an accurate assessment, even though I can tell you there's probably a good literal 100 of these 2012s and 13s out there with my fingerprints all over them, and I haven't heard back from people telling me that it's been a problem. So even though this article here is saying the 2012 and the 2013 still need some sort of sensor.
yeah, well, all right, we'll keep it simple. I'll order the hardware today or tomorrow.
Sure.
I've got the 480 gigabyte, which I'll check out, and assuming that turns out to be suitable, and you test it and you think it's suitable, then I'll have you install that or something at some point over the next month or two.
All right.
And we'll go from there.
Cool.
Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye.
Well, there you go. Hey, Darren, how are you? Hi, Darren. Yes. You like the new setup? I don't think I've seen you since I've set this up here now. I've now dedicated YouTube or the half of the office to YouTube. There you go. Yes. Did you like that phone call? I'm doing that a lot more often now. And, of course, this article I have on the screen is specifically talking about the 2012 and the 2013 iMac still needing a added sensor for the hard drive, or in this case SSD. So yeah, I have never added a sensor to a 2012 or later iMac for an SSD upgrade, and it hasn't bit me in the butt, but apparently you're still supposed to install a sensor on a 2012 or a 2013, and a 2014 or later apparently don't need it, and I just assumed it didn't need it. So there you go. Darren, how are you? All right, so I don't normally go live at this hour, but I did have that phone call, and I figure it would be of value to you. And again, I'll put in the not the show notes. What is it called? The metadata when you do a search for sensors about the 2012 and 2013 iMac needing a sensor for the SSD or hard drive. I'll just link this article I found. No, actually, my friend Ben, who was on the phone, found and emailed me. I'll link that to the YouTube channel before I disconnect here. Let me actually do that now. Yes. Okay. Copy. Darren, how are you? Thanks for saying hi, Darren. Let's see here. I gotta go to YouTube. Yeah, if we find an article that's of meaning and I talk about it, I will link it in the YouTube chat. Come on, here we go. And paste. Darren, thank you for saying hi. I appreciate you showing up. This link I've just put in the chat is the webpage you see on the screen, and it is specifically about the nuances of installing a temperature sensor for the iMacs 2012 and later. All right, that's all I really wanted to offer everyone, and that is why I went live at this hour. If I think I'm going to have some quality content, I'll jump on live so everyone can eavesdrop about the conversation. I'll be here. I'm still scheduled to be here at around 10 a.m. tomorrow. I do appreciate everyone that shows up regularly. I do this normally at 10 a.m. Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. All right. See you later. Give me that call at 855-434-8787 or show up in the YouTube chat.